If you've ever used Windows for years, you already know the pattern. You get comfortable. You learn where everything is. And then one day, your system starts slowing down. Updates interrupt your workflow. Ads and recommendations creep into places they shouldn't be. And suddenly, you feel like you're using your computer on someone else's terms. That's usually the moment people start looking for alternatives. And that's exactly where Linux comes in. But here's the problem. Most Linux distributions are not designed with Windows users in mind. They assume you already know how things work, or they throw you into a completely different world without warning. That's why so many beginners try Linux once and then give up. But there is one Linux distro that stands out, one that feels familiar enough for Windows users while still giving you the power, freedom, and control that Linux is known for. And if I had to recommend a single Linux distribution to every Windows user in 2026, it would be Ubuntu. Now, before you assume this is just another generic recommendation, let's actually break this down in a way that makes sense. If you're coming from Windows, because switching operating systems is not just about software, it's about habits, muscle memory, and how comfortable you feel doing your everyday tasks. When you install Ubuntu for the first time, the experience is surprisingly smooth. The installation process is designed to be simple, almost guided, similar to installing Windows itself. You don't have to worry about complicated partitioning unless you want to. You just click through a few steps, choose your settings, and within minutes, you're looking at a fully working desktop environment. And this desktop environment matters a lot. Ubuntu uses a system called GNOME, which is designed to be clean, modern, and minimal. At first glance, it may feel a little different from Windows, especially because the taskbar isn't exactly in the same place, and the Start menu is replaced with an overview system. But once you spend a little time with it, you'll realize something important. Everything you need is still there, just organized differently. You still have a dock where you can pin your favorite apps. You still have a search function that allows you to quickly find files, applications, and settings. And you still have a system tray with network, battery, and sound controls. The difference is that Ubuntu removes a lot of the clutter that Windows tends to accumulate over time. One of the biggest reasons I recommend Ubuntu to Windows users is because of its stability. Unlike Windows, where updates sometimes break things or install at inconvenient times, Ubuntu follows a predictable release cycle. There are long-term support versions that are supported for several years, which means you can install at once and not worry about major changes disrupting your system. This is especially important for people who just want their computer to work without constantly adjusting settings or troubleshooting issues. Another major advantage is performance. Ubuntu is known for being lightweight compared to Windows, especially on older hardware. If you have a laptop or desktop that struggles to run the latest version of Windows, Ubuntu can breathe new life into that system. Applications open faster, the system boots quicker, and overall responsiveness improves significantly. This is one of the main reasons why Linux is so popular among developers and tech enthusiasts. Now, let's talk about software, because this is usually the biggest concern for Windows users. Will my programs work on Ubuntu? Is the first question people ask. And it's a valid one. The truth is that Linux doesn't natively support Windows applications, but it does offer alternatives for most tasks. For example, instead of Microsoft Office, you can use Libre. Instead of Photoshop, you can use GIMP. For browsing, Chrome and Firefox are fully supported. But what about games and Windows-only software? This is where things get interesting. Tools like Wine and Proton have made it possible to run many Windows applications and games on Linux with impressive performance. In some cases, games even run better on Linux than on Windows, depending on the hardware and optimization. Steam has also embraced Linux support, making it easier than ever for gamers to switch. Ubuntu also shines when it comes to updates and security on Windows. Updates can sometimes feel intrusive or unpredictable. On Ubuntu, updates are more transparent and controlled. You decide when to update, and the system doesn't force unexpected restarts in the middle of your work. Security is also a strong point, because Linux is inherently less targeted by malware compared to Windows. That doesn't mean it's immune, but the risk is significantly lower. Another thing that makes Ubuntu beginner-friendly is the community support. If you run into a problem, chances are someone else has already experienced it and solved it. Forums, tutorials, and documentation are widely available, which makes troubleshooting much easier compared to more obscure Linux distributions. Now let's address the learning curve, because switching from Windows to Linux is still a transition. At first, you might feel a bit lost. File systems are organized differently. Software installation works differently. And some settings are in places you wouldn't expect. But this is where Ubuntu does a great job of easing that transition. The Settings app is well organized, and many tasks can be done through a graphical interface without needing to use the terminal. That said, the terminal is still a powerful tool in Ubuntu, and learning it can unlock a lot of advanced capabilities. But the important thing is that you're not forced to use it from day one. You can gradually learn it at your own pace. Another major advantage of Ubuntu is customization. Unlike Windows, where customization is limited or sometimes restricted, Linux gives you full control over how your system looks and behaves. You can change themes, icons, layouts, and even the entire desktop environment if you want. This level of flexibility allows you to create a system that truly matches your preferences. Performance customization is also a big deal. You can choose to run lighter desktop environments if you want even more speed, or stick with the default for a balance of performance and aesthetics. This adaptability is one of the reasons Linux is used in everything from supercomputers to low-powered devices. Let's talk about privacy, because this is something more and more users are concerned about. Windows has faced criticism over data collection and telemetry, and while it has improved over time, concerns still exist. Ubuntu, on the other hand, is much more transparent about what data it collects, and you have control over it. In fact, many users switch to Linux specifically for privacy reasons. Now, is Ubuntu perfect? No operating system is. There are some challenges. For example, certain proprietary software may not be available, and some hardware drivers might require extra setup. However, these issues have become less common over time as Linux support continues to improve. For most Windows users, the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks. You get a system that is faster, more secure, more private, and more customizable. And most importantly, you get control over your own computer. If you're planning to switch, the best way to start is by trying Ubuntu in a dual boot setup or running it from a USB drive. This allows you to test the system without fully committing. Once you feel comfortable, you can install it alongside or instead of Windows. Another approach is using Ubuntu in a virtual machine, which allows you to explore the system within Windows itself. This is a great way to learn without making any changes to your main system. As you spend more time with Ubuntu, you'll start to notice patterns. You'll understand how packages are installed, how updates work, and how to troubleshoot minor issues. Over time, the system becomes second nature, just like Windows once was, and that's really the key point. Switching to Linux is not about abandoning everything you know. It's about expanding your options and gaining more control over your computing experience. Ubuntu serves as the perfect bridge between the familiar world of Windows and the powerful world of Linux. So, if you've been thinking about making the switch, or if you're just curious about what Linux has to offer, Ubuntu is the best place to start. It's beginner-friendly, powerful, and widely supported. It gives you everything you need to transition smoothly without overwhelming you. In 2026, as technology continues to evolve and users demand more control, privacy, and efficiency, Ubuntu stands out as a reliable and forward-thinking choice. It's not just another operating system, it's a gateway into a different way of thinking about how computers should work. And once you experience that freedom, it's hard to go back.